There's a voice inside you. It doesn't yell, it doesn't demand, it just knows. But somehow, somewhere along the way, you stopped listening to it. Maybe it was when someone told you you were too sensitive. Or maybe it was when you made a choice that felt right, but it didn't end well, so you decided that your gut couldn't be trusted. Or maybe you've never really known how to tell the difference between your intuition and your fear. For a lot of people, that inner knowing, their gut instinct, gets buried early. We're taught to think things through, to wait, to not jump to conclusions, to be reasonable. And while reason has its place, it often pushes out the part of us that just feels something is right, or wrong, or off. So we override it. We learn to silence our instincts in small ways at first. We stay in conversations that make us uncomfortable. We say yes when our whole body says no. We ignore the little flutters of unease. We second-guess that sudden clarity. Over time, that becomes a pattern. You begin to mistrust your own sense of knowing, not because it's been wrong, but because you've been taught to question it. And here's the hard part. When you stop trusting your intuition, it starts feeling quieter, not because it left you, but because you stopped answering when it knocked. It's like an old friend who used to call every day, and eventually stopped calling, not out of anger, but because they weren't sure if you wanted to hear from them anymore. Your intuition doesn't scream, it whispers. And in a world that rewards noise, logic, and certainty, whispers can get drowned out, especially if the people around you benefit from you not listening to yourself. There are entire industries, institutions, even relationships, built on making you doubt what you feel. That's why it can feel radical just to say, I know this isn't right for me, even when you can't explain why, even when it doesn't make sense on paper. Because the truth is, intuition doesn't always come with a full explanation. It comes with a pull, a knowing, a flicker of light in your chest. So if you're wondering why you don't trust it, maybe it's not because your intuition is weak. Maybe it's because the world has done everything it can to make sure you don't hear it. But here's the good news. It's still there. It always has been. And it's never too late to start listening again. We live in a culture that idolizes logic. If you can't back it up with facts, if it doesn't fit into a spreadsheet or a 10-point plan, it gets dismissed. Feelings are labeled irrational, instinct becomes impulsive, and gut wisdom, that's just superstition, right? Except, you've been there, you've had that moment where something felt off, and you were right, or where you knew something would work out, even when it shouldn't have, and it did. But instead of strengthening your trust in that inner knowing, you probably brushed it off, called it coincidence, luck, random chance. Why? Because we've been trained to trust proof over perception. We want evidence, a map, a safety net. We want guarantees before we leap. But intuition doesn't work like that. It doesn't send a formal proposal for your approval, it nudges, it taps. It whispers when the room gets quiet. And for a lot of people, quiet is uncomfortable. Stillness is unfamiliar. We're so used to analyzing everything that we lose the ability to simply feel what's true. Sometimes, logic isn't helping us at all. It's hiding our fear. You talk yourself out of leaving that relationship. You rationalize staying in that job. You make a list of reasons why you should ignore the feeling in your chest, the one begging you to choose something different. But the truth is, your logic isn't always objective. It's influenced by fear, by trauma, by what other people expect of you. And when you only let logic drive the car, your intuition gets left on the side of the road, hands in its pockets, watching you go. Trusting your intuition doesn't mean rejecting reason. It means making space for both. It means honoring the quiet voice inside you before you demand it explain itself. It means noticing how your body feels, not just what your brain says. It means asking yourself, what if the feeling is the fact? The more you allow intuition to sit at the table, the more clearly it speaks. And the more clearly it speaks, the more you'll remember. It was never about choosing between logic and feeling. It was about remembering that they both belong, but only one of them knows what it's like to carry your soul. Sometimes, what you think is your intuition speaking isn't. It's fear wearing a mask. And when you've been hurt, dismissed, betrayed, or gaslit, it gets harder to tell the difference. You second guess what you feel, not because you're broken, but because your brain learned to survive. And survival often means being cautious, holding back, pausing too long instead of leaping too soon. So now when a gut feeling arises, the first thing you do is interrogate it. You ask, what if I'm wrong? What if I regret this? What if this is just anxiety pretending to be truth? But here's the trap. Fear has a louder voice than intuition. Fear yells. Fear scrambles. Fear says, don't move, don't risk, don't change. And you think you're being wise, when really you're just staying small. It's not your fault. You learned to be afraid because once, being cautious kept you safe. And in some ways it worked. You avoided pain, you avoided failure, you avoided judgment, but you also avoided growth, joy, freedom, alignment. And now, that same fear pretends to be your protector. It whispers things like, don't trust that feeling. It says, you've been wrong before. It tells you to ask someone else for their opinion, because clearly they know better than you. That's how fear operates, not by shutting you down completely, but by sowing doubt. It doesn't have to shout to win. It just has to make you pause long enough to miss the moment. Here's the truth. Your intuition is calm. It doesn't beg for your attention. It doesn't threaten or catastrophize. It offers clarity, not chaos. So one way to tell the difference: fear makes you feel smaller. Intuition makes you feel clearer. Fear is heavy. Intuition is grounded. Fear reacts. Intuition responds. When you've spent a long time believing that fear is wisdom, it takes practice to separate the two. But you can relearn that trust. You can learn to notice the still, quiet knowing beneath the storm of anxiety. You're not broken for doubting it. You were just trying to stay safe. But now safety looks different. Now it looks like learning to trust yourself again, even when fear is still in the room. Because fear may always show up, but it doesn't get to be the guide anymore. There was a time when you didn't question your instincts, when you just knew what you wanted, when you felt something and followed it, not because you had proof, but because it was yours. That's the bond you're trying to rebuild, not just with your intuition, but with yourself. Because that's what intuition really is. A relationship, it's not a magical power. It's not a spiritual lottery ticket. It's the connection between your deepest self and your daily decisions. And like any relationship, it takes time. You have to earn your own trust again. That might sound strange, but think about it. If you've spent years ignoring your inner voice, overriding your gut, or outsourcing your choices to other people, why wouldn't there be distance? Reconnecting with your intuition starts with presence, not perfect decisions, not flawless results, just being present enough to notice when something feels true. Maybe it's the tension in your shoulders when you're around someone, or the lightness you feel after setting a boundary, or the weird calm that settles in your chest when you say no without guilt. Those aren't coincidences. They're signals. Your body, your spirit, your subconscious, all working together to guide you home. The more you notice those signals, the stronger they get, and the more you honor them, the more consistent your intuition becomes. Because here's the secret. Your intuition is always speaking. The question is, are you listening? Listening means slowing down. It means creating space between stimulus and response. It means saying, I may not have all the answers, but I trust myself enough to start moving. You don't rebuild trust by never making mistakes. You rebuild it by staying with yourself when you make them, by refusing to abandon yourself when something goes wrong. And with each small moment of trust, each gut feeling you follow, each quiet yes or no you listen to, you send yourself a powerful message. I've got you now. I believe you. I'm not going to leave you hanging anymore. Eventually, that voice you once doubted becomes the compass you can't live without, not because it's flawless, but because it's yours. And trusting yourself again, that's not just a skill, that's a homecoming.